How did Lincoln's death lead to the re-emerge of slavery, the Black Coat, and the Jim Crow era? Sadaf Pasikhani, Block 1-2. Before I talk about what happened after Lincoln's death, I would like to tell you about the 13th Amendment and the Freedoms Bureau. On February the 1st, 1865, declared slavery unconstitutional and becomes law on December 18, 1865. This guarantees under law that Southerns could not return to slavery. Many masters did not tell slaves that slavery had been abolished and kept them anyways. White Southerns had no intention of the following law. In March 1867, Congress established Freedoms Bureau, empowered to provide former slaves with food, transportation, assistance in finding jobs, schools, and help settle them on abandoned or previously confiscated lands. Congress only permits Bureau to operate for 1 year. After Lincoln's death, though, the presidential reconstruction happens. Andrew Johnson messes up a lot of things. He created some laws under his plan of reconstructions. He announced, firstly, all the lands that had been given to black people should now be returned to white Southern people that they were taken from. Secondly, he says, all the states should be readmitted to the USA as long as, firstly, they uphold the abolition of slavery, secondly, they swear the loyalty of the USA, and thirdly, they repay their war debt. When he announced these, Northerns were like, this is not enough punishments for Southerns. Southerns were like, this is too much and we cannot handle this. But blacks, on the other hand, they were so frustrated and they had no choice. Also, about the black coats. These laws that were enforced by all white police and state militia that limited blacks socially and economically were observed in every U.S. Southern state. These codes were created after the American Civil War, during the Reconstruction era between 1865 and 1877 in order to force them to work for low wages. The codes were also created because whites could not accept that blacks were now free. These codes, however, existed before and northern states had them. Some examples of black codes. Firstly, all codes authorized officials to apprehend unemployed blacks, find them with vagrancy, and hire them out to private employees. Blacks would work for these employees for free to pay their fine. Secondly, make blacks work on plantations because they thought they would not work unless they are forced to work. Thirdly, blacks were not allowed to buy or lease farms or lands. Lastly, blacks could not vote. Also, the radical reconstruction is about that Congress does not want Andrew Johnson to handle this anymore. So they take over and pass 2 new constitutional amendments. Therefore, they created the 14th and 15th Amendment. 14th was, all people should be equal. This became the platform for 20th century civil rights movement. And the 15th, black men have the right to vote. After the 15th Amendment, the South turns to violence. Like some radical groups like the KKK formed and began to target blacks as well as white Republican members. Afterwards, the Jim Crow era begins. They thought Jim Crow era was like a segregation, which equaled separate but equal. Well, that's what they thought. It was a system of anti-black laws, but also a way of life. Whites were seen as supreme, blacks were seen far, far less. The segregation between whites and blacks was the blacks got the black coat and the whites had the regular law the government set.